Thank you for joining me on my soapbox today. My name is Mindy Pressling, and I am the Client Services Senior Manager for Spencer Ogden, a global energy and infrastructure recruitment agency. As global recruitment experts in energy and infrastructure, we're building an industry that impacts millions. We provide leading recruitment services to our clients and candidates, creating careers to power a sustainable future. The Soapbox series is a podcast we've launched to have open discussions with thought leaders in the renewable energy industry to discuss the human element behind our industry and the challenges we face in recruiting, retaining, and promoting top talent, especially as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. My guest today is the VP of Development and Construction for Rivon, a large-scale, vertically integrated renewable energy company with its roots as one of the largest renewable energy asset managers in the US. In this first episode, Aron and I talk through his professional development from an associate director at EDP to the VP of Development and Construction at Arevon in the space of just 18 months. During this same time, he grew a team from just 5 to now a team of 35 and counting with Rivon. We talk about how even in the best of times, scaling a team like this is challenging, and add to that, Aron's unwavering commitment to building a diverse team makes this growth truly impressive. My relationship with Aron goes back about a year, and Spencer Ogden's relationship with Rivon goes back over 3.5 years. We've partnered with Rivon on talent solutions across multiple departments, such as asset management, project finance, and more, in both their New York and Scottsdale offices. With that, I'd like to introduce you to Aron Branam, the VP of Development and Construction for Rivon.
Aron, thank you for joining me today here in sunny Scottsdale to meet with me. For our audience, we have Aron Branam here, the VP of Development and Construction for Rivon, and I'd love for you to give us a quick overview of who you are and who Rivon are in the market.
Sure. So let me start with Rivon, since that's probably the more interesting story. The company traditionally has been an asset management affiliate, which supports the Capital Dynamics Clean Energy Investment Fund. Historically, they have purchased projects at NTP, or notice to proceed, or commercial operation, and then the company has managed those assets during the operational life. The company, however, I think seeing the risk-reward trade-off and desiring more reward has moved earlier into the project lifecycle, and that's why I was brought on to the team. And so I joined Rivon in April of last year, 2020. I think the pandemic has caused us to remember last year as 2019, so just to be clear. So I've been with the company about 18 months, and my charge was to build out the development, engineering, interconnection, and construction teams to support our foray into those earlier stages of the life cycle. It's been an interesting ride for me thus far. When I joined the company, we were 5 strong, and today we're around 30, so there's been some significant growth in my team, and I think we'll touch on that later. But today, I'm part of this organization that is Rivon. We're an integrated renewable energy company, really delivering across the entire value chain from inception to operations. And it's been a very exciting ride so far. I think we have a lot of significant growth ahead of us. So yeah, let me pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that context. And I do really want to sort of unpack a little bit more about what Rivon is doing and your role within Rivon. But I think what would be really valuable would be to hear from you about your career history in renewable energy, because you've been in the industry for quite some time and pretty early on in your career. So I'd love to hear a little bit more on how you got into renewable energy, and then what or who actually got you into the industry.
Yeah, my story is really one of a multi-generational story, beginning with my grandfather, who was a coal miner in Tennessee, and then my father, who is a project manager in the petrochemical industry for firms that are well known, like BP, Saudi Aramco. So it was kind of a natural evolution for me after my engineering undergraduate degree to make my way into kind of the next phase of energy production, which is the renewable energy industry. And as you did say, I was lucky in that I got an earlier start in my career. I've been doing renewables since around 2008, or been involved in the renewable energy energy industry since around 2008. And I would say that my story has been one that is strategic and intentional, but definitely not without uncertainty and frustration along the way. As I mentioned, I have an engineering undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering, and I think, like many undergraduate students, I didn't have great direction coming out of school, so I took a job at a major EPC firm to kind of cut my teeth. It was the work I did there was primarily focused on emissions retrofits of petrochem facilities, and I think that was what kind of caused me to switch gears and think that I really liked this idea of cutting emissions. I was less interested in kind of the propagation of the traditional model of power generation and energy production. So I made a decision fairly soon after taking my role at Jacobs Engineering. I was with the company a little over a year to try and cut my teeth in the renewable energy industry. And I took a couple risky moves, but they panned out. I was able to secure an internship at Austin Energy in the late 2000s. At the time, Austin Energy was really at the foray or the leading edge of the utility space, engaging with kind of renewables and energy efficiency. And I think that really, from then it was cemented that this is what I wanted to do as my career. And I was able to transition then into a research fellowship at Rocky Mountain Institute. Further kind of cemented, I got cement shoes in the renewable industry. I'm not going anywhere now. But that fellowship ended in 2009, and that was a really challenging time, I think, in the job market generally, but especially in the energy industry. And, here I had been on this upward trajectory, feeling very positive about my career, and suddenly confronted with all of this uncertainty. As it would happen, a friend of mine from Rocky Mountain Institute asked me if I was looking for a job. I, of course, was. And he lobbed my resume over to a friend of a friend at what was then Horizon Wind Energy and became EDP Renewables. And it was a bit of a slow play. They definitely had me hooked, but it took about 4 months to get me into EDPR. And I would say that, that was a bit fortunate for me. And EDPR is a wonderful company to work for and really provided me a lot of opportunity to direct my own career, over the next decade. And I was with EDPR 10 and a half years, starting at the lowest rung of the development team, the project development role, and ultimately culminating in an associate director position of project management, in which I was really the conduit between the executive team and the project execution team, making sure everything was moving smoothly, and that the executive team was fully informed about what was going on with the projects. It was definitely, like I said, a great place to work, great people, and I think when you're somewhere over 10 years, there's a lot of gravity in that situation. And it was only a bit, I guess, through my relationship with Justin Johnson that I came to Rivon. So Justin and I worked together at EDPR, working on one of the hardest projects that I've ever worked on, the Jericho Rise Wind Farm in upstate New York. And we developed a really great relationship. We had known each other during our time at EDPR. But I think we got to know each other on a deeper level, both professionally and personally, as you often do in these very trying situations. And so when Justin left EDPR, he came to Rivon to be its CEO of the asset management affiliate. And he'd been kind of trying to pull me away for some time. And, I think it's as much, the saying is who you know, right? Not what you know. And, and eventually Justin brought me the right opportunity, and that was this vice president role, and really to build something in what I saw as an old colleague of mine, or a former colleague of mine, like to say, Rivon was a startup without a capital problem. And so that was a very exciting opportunity to kind of build this new thing within an established firm. And so I ended up here at Arevon. And as mentioned, we've done a lot of great work over the last 18 months, both implementing projects that the company had in the pipeline, as well as growing the team to further support in these earlier stages of the project lifecycle.
That's great. I didn't realize that you and Justin worked together at EDPR. I was curious about what prompted the transition for you, or just the move for you from EDPR to Rivon, since you've had such a long-standing career there? I work in recruitment, obviously, so we're always headhunting into folks who have longer tenure with organizations, and it's a relationship. It's really tough. I mean, after any number of years, but especially after 10 and a half years in a relationship, it's hard to leave sometimes. So, it sounds like he had been trying to bring you over for some time. What was the impetus for you? What was like, yes, okay, I'll do it? Why? What sold you?
Well, I think bottom line is it's a very difficult decision to leave somewhere where you've been for so long, and you have these very deep, like I said, both personal and professional relationships. Justin was one of those, but I had many of those throughout the company. And I think there's just kind of this known quantity of going to work with people that you respect and appreciate on a daily basis. And always making the jump, that's a risk because you don't necessarily know what you're getting into. And you can only suss out so much from the interview process. So knowing Justin was the leader here gave me a lot of confidence in joining the organization because I knew he valued what I valued. But I think more relevant to your question is what prompted the move. And after 10 years making these kind of measured steps and growing in the organization, I think each organization, including EDPR, tries to make opportunity where they can. But as you get to the top, there are fewer and fewer opportunities. And I have told others, and I hold myself to the same bar of I always want to leave a place where I'm sad to leave. I'm not excited to leave, or rather, I'm not discouraged by where I am and needing to make a jump. And so I had this very fruitful career at EDPR, and I would have been happy staying. They treated me extremely well and like I said, created a lot of opportunity for me to direct my own career over that decade. But there are opportunities that come along that you don't want to pass up. And in talking with people, former colleagues and friends that I trusted about making the move, one of my very close friend and former colleague, Toby Butterfield, used the analogy that you're like a spring, and you've been building these skills over 10 years and compressing the spring and creating all of this potential energy. And I think by coming to Rivon, have allowed that spring to kind of expand and release that and turn it into something kinetic and create action. And so I always really liked that comparison.
Cool.
To summarize, though, never an easy decision to leave a place like that after so long. But I wanted to leave, excited about where I'm going and sad to leave where I was coming from. And this was the time and place and opportunity that created that for me.
Cool. No, thank you for sharing that. I think that moving from one company to another is a very deeply personal decision, obviously. And like I said, I work in recruitment, so this is something that's difficult when you're interviewing with folks and helping them to consider if this is going to be the right time and the right place for them to make a move, because it's so deeply personal and intimate. And to share that with someone is, I don't know, it sounds silly because it's a professional decision, but it is also a personal decision. So
yeah, I don't know, maybe it's unique to renewables, but the people that work in this industry it's just a wonderful group of people generally in my experience. And I think when you get to go to work with really wonderful people every day, it's not just about the job anymore, right? You have this larger mission, of course. I think saving the world, it's a noble mission. But to get to do that with people that you genuinely care about, that remain in your community, after you leave, it doesn't make those decisions easy.
Yeah.
But I would also say that it is a small industry, and there are examples here within Arevon of where we've separated with people that we've worked with, and now we've come back together at this new company because there is a limited talent pool right now to draw from. And so those relationships that we formed, that we can trust, I think we capitalize on that as we look to move forward and grow these new organizations and create new opportunities for those people that have really supported us in the past.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right. So in looking back on your history and what you've shared, I think what's really, I don't know if it's unique, but definitely impressive about the last 18 months for you is you've gone from an associate director to a VP, which is not just one big promotion, that's really two major promotions. How has that transition been for you?
I mean, it's been the most challenging thing I've done in my career. But I think it's less kind of this short-term 18-month, two-step path, and really one that was built over 15 years. And I kind of use the spring analogy. And from the very beginning, I've known that I want to lead a company. I want to be part of that team that's helping chart the path for an organization. And so I've really been building the skills for a very long time. And even in my associate director role, I think often titles are not directly related to the scope of one's role. And also, when you want to move up, you're often doing the job before you get the title. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot that I was doing within EDPR that directly correlated or translated into this vice president role that I wasn't necessarily being able to put to use at EDPR. And while I was very successful there, and I felt like I was supported and making a major contribution, for people like myself, I wanted to do more, and I think that's what this role provided. So, but specifically to the challenges, whereas my role was much more project focused, and then kind of eased into the people management and then process creation. Here, I'm really responsible for all three of those P's. I call them the three P's, and I'm sure my team has heard me say this many times. But the work we do really is around projects first and foremost. Mm-hmm. Then we have to develop the people, because they are the ones doing the work on those projects and ensuring that they're well-resourced and trained to be successful in that implementation. And then under them, and part of that is the development of these processes and the tools that they need to be successful. So it's kind of this hierarchy of the three Ps, the project, people, and process, that I've gone from, having a scope of one to having the scope of all. And I would say that's been the biggest challenge. And as you move up in your career or take on these higher level positions, the weighting of each of those shifts. And so while I'm taking on them all, I'm also seeing a shift from a project focus to more of the people management. And I think that is truly the greatest resource we have as a company. And it's interesting being responsible for so many people so quickly. Yeah. And wanting to, you suddenly feel personally accountable to all of these people that you're hiring. And it's not easy to chart a path. And I want to ensure that all of them feel stable, secure, and happy in the work they're doing. And I would say for me as a leader, that is one of the biggest challenges that I face on a day-to-day basis. I have that development expertise I can draw on the 15 years I have of that. I've always been somewhat anal retentive in my process creation. I've always been kind of an organization guru, and so that's been a personal passion. But the human element is it's the most unpredictable. It's the most difficult to manage. Certainly, I think that my experience at Chicago Booth and my coursework during my MBA focused on management and leadership prepared me for that, or gave me the skill sets to slot into that position. But being successful in that role longer term, I think, is very challenging. Yeah. And very dynamic. And so day in and day out, I'm really thinking about, as I said, how do I keep my people happy, secure, and working to support our project work? Yeah.
In working with you, I can, even from, I think, one of the first or second conversations that we had around hiring for your team, I could tell how much stock you put into the people on your team and how much you care about them, which I can relate to just being a people manager myself, which, it's something that you can tell that you really enjoy it, but then there's also the pressure of it because you just care genuinely about how people are doing, especially in the post-COVID world, right? There's a lot more stimulation out there that could, or overstimulation, maybe an overwhelm out there that can contribute to how people are doing. In some ways it's good because I think we're in a time now where people are maybe more comfortable sharing what they're struggling with. But as managers, it can be tough when you really deeply care about the people that you're managing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, these people they're human beings. They have real lives, and I want them to feel positive about showing up to work every day. As you mentioned, I don't know that we're post-pandemic quite yet.
Yeah.
I certainly think
I
our
never
industry,
know what to call it.
Yeah, I think we're going to be we can talk about this a little more, and as far as the challenges the industry faces, but I don't think we're going to be out of it for a number of years, especially the supply chain constraints we're feeling. And when I think about, especially my newer employees coming into this industry, they're literally seeing every problem that you would ever face. Usually a project faces one or two of these problems. We're literally facing every single thing you could think of simultaneously. And so keeping them confident that they're going to be successful is definitely a challenge. But I think you look for the right mentality in the people you're bringing in, and that makes it much easier to support them and give them what they need to come in and put their best foot forward every single day. And, I hope that many of them will listen to this. So I'm just going to say, I feel really honored to have the group that I do. I think they're an amazingly talented and intelligent and hardworking group of people. And I don't think I can ever show them enough praise for the commitment they make day in and day out. But it definitely keeps me up at night, thinking about how to keep them happy over the long term, because they are human beings and I'm a human being, and ultimately it comes down to that personal element. Companies come and go, but we're going to be around for a while, and I want to keep these relationships with them beyond even their time at Rivon.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear more about your team. You mentioned since joining, your team has gone from 5 to 30. That's okay. What's the makeup of your team? What types of positions do you hire for? And you mentioned, kind of high level what your team's responsible, that you take the project from early stage development all the way through to the end of construction to operations.
Correct.
Okay. So what type of folks do you hire for, and what is your team responsible for, maybe a little bit deeper level?
Yeah, so my team has grown, strategically, but also out of necessity. I like to use this battlefield analogy as to how we grew, and then I can talk to you a little bit more about the skill sets. But when I joined Rivon as a small team of 5, you're really wearing a lot of hats, and we had these projects that were, approaching the point at which they needed to start construction, some of which were already in. And with a small team, there's just too much to go around. So I kind of liken it to, I looked for the soldiers that were injured, or dying on the battlefield, and I went out and I triaged them first. And then I brought in another person or another medic, to continue the analogy, to take over and keep them alive. Then I went back to the team that was, maybe not injured, but needing to go in next to the battle and making sure they were prepared. And then at last, I think we're finally getting to the point where we can be proactive and be very strategic in how we're hiring. And so what that's by necessity, but also design, the way the team has shaped up is a very matrix organization across the 4 disciplines that I highlighted earlier: the development, interconnection, engineering, and construction teams. Okay. And so first and foremost, not having the luxury of dividing between development project managers or construction project managers, which is how EDPR had been structured and was my main reference point. I saw an opportunity to have people involved across the life cycle. So really a project management team as opposed to deep expertise in development or construction. Okay. And so I focused there first, bringing in people that had maybe some depth in one of those areas, but who I had confidence could pick up the remaining parts of the skill set. So as I kind of grew the project management team, my next focus was bringing in subject matter expertise to support them in filling in those gaps. So I started by bringing in a construction and engineering director who had very deep expertise coming from a major EPC. His name's Nick Maynard, and Nick was one of my best hires right away. And he was able to immediately kind of bridge this knowledge gap for a lot of the PMs. We followed that up with hiring someone who had deep construction expertise, and Greg Patzer, who came to us from DEPCOM. And so now we've been able to kind of divide the life cycle. Nick is focusing on these incredibly technical and complex engineering problems and supporting the team underneath him. Greg has then been able to peel off some of the construction expertise and now be a reference point for this PM team. And then I'm remiss in mentioning Brenda Malati, who's our head of interconnection. Brenda came from PJM, very, very experienced in the interconnection process. And I was actually lucky to have her here from the get-go. And so Brenda was another one of these subject matter expertise, these subject matter experts.
So in growing your team from 5 to 30 people, you've given us some context in terms of the strategy behind that. But what about the actual recruiting and the challenges behind that? Because we all know that Rivon isn't the only renewable energy company to have grown so dramatically in the last 18 months. So what were some of the challenges that you faced in hiring so many people, finding the right talent? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think when I joined, right, I inherited a team of people that was fairly small. I think first thing is to assess the need. And that was really what I did. I took a broad survey of the project landscape, seeing where we needed to focus. And coming from Booth, like, it's all about show me the data. So I really took an analytical approach to that, applying resource allocation by project and difficulty of project to see how my team was weighted, right? Who was overworked, who was underworked, which is never the situation for anyone. So really, how many people were overworked? And then we talked about the battlefield analogy. Immediately start looking for people to bring in. What is that first skill set that I needed? And so I think that was the first challenge, is just analyzing the scenario that I was in and where did I need to apply new resources the fastest. And that then brings you to kind of the challenge of hiring. Fortunately or unfortunately, the industry is small. And so I think that's challenging from how big the labor pool is, but it's also allowed many of us to draw on kind of our deep connections within the industry and look for those people that we loved working with and that are very talented and could fill that business need that we had. And so that's kind of how I started with my own network, right? What are the known quantities, the people that I know I can rely on and that were looking for a new opportunity that I felt I could provide for them? So we started there, but you also, that is limiting in that you want diversity of thought, you want diversity in culture and ethnicity and gender, and you can't create that in your own network. Essentially, you can't just manifest it, right? It kind of shapes how it is. And so with that focus on creating this diverse group of people, it was about then reaching out to what are the right recruiting resources that can support in this. And I think finding the right recruiter it can be challenging, and both being on the candidate side as well as the hiring side, not all recruiters are created equal, right? I think Spencer Ogden, of course, is among the top, why we work together. And I've had good luck with a couple other recruiters. But I think along the lines of diversity, it's been not only a challenge for us to give direction. We can say we want diverse hires, but it's also challenging for recruiters to find, I think, the right people to fill that need as well, for diversity as well as the skill sets that we need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're all still dealing with that. And we tried a couple different approaches, anonymizing resumes. You were a part of that. It certainly helped, but in the end, I think what we realized is we want to know who we're hiring. We need to prioritize diversity. So how do you do that when you need to hire really fast and a lot of people? And that's what brings me back to finding the right recruiting support.
Yeah.
And then I think once you find that, right, you get this pattern of interaction. You get to know the recruiter gets to know you and the company and what the company needs and how seriously are they really engaging to bring diversity into the company, or is it just lip service? Do they just need candidates, right? And it's they're like, well, we can't get the right diversity, so we have to fill this position.
Yeah.
I would say that's, I've struggled with that as well, and that's actually one of the biggest challenges that I've had is this pressure to hire quickly.
Yep.
Because the work continues to come, and I'm only one person. My team is, they can only do so much. But with a priority towards creating a diverse group, and that has been extremely difficult. I think especially important for me is the gender balance across our team. Research shows that by having a diverse group based on gender, there is statistical evidence that shows that you get more out of the company, or that those companies are more successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to just pay lip service to that. Like, it means a lot to me. During my career, I've had men, or male and female leaders, men and women who have been both great and also bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've taken a lot of lessons from that. And given this unique position that I was in, to grow a team from 5 to 30, 6 times the size of when I started, means that I really had the opportunity to prioritize diversity on my own terms. And so I think we've been very successful in that at all levels. I think one of the major things we see is diversity maybe at the bottom, but less so at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And so one key focus was that I wanted to see that diversity at every level within my team. And so at my director level, I have 2 men and 2 women, only one of whom is a white male. So even our, the other male is diverse culturally.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important from optics perspective,
mm-hmm.
because the people at the bottom are going to look up, and what they see is what they're going to think to replicate. And so at my PMs, that's the next level down. The gender, it's probably a 60-40 breakdown, and then at the next level, we've been really lucky to keep it about 50-50. The technical side, I would say, is even harder to hire for, like in the engineering and interconnection disciplines. It's one of the reasons I feel so lucky to have Brenda Malati on my team. Talk about a diamond in the rough, right? Finding an interconnection subject matter expert who is a woman, who is Indian. She just brings so much to the team, not only of who she is as a person, but really her professional expertise. So I feel like I got the best of all worlds in Brenda. And that's what I've been trying to replicate at every level. I want the right skill set, and I want you to represent what we want to be as a company. And to my own detriment, I have been slower to hire for some positions, because I wasn't willing to just rush into hiring people to fill the seat, even though I definitely had that need, because then you end up, the core of your business or the core of your team is not what you are representing to the outside world, or what you endeavor to be, or does not represent your culture as a company.
Yeah.
And so I think, for me, having control over this team, I feel like it's been a major success from a diversity perspective. Not only gender and cultural lines, but diversity of thought,
mm-hmm.
diversity of experience. And so, I mentioned this before, I feel extremely lucky to have the team that I do and honored to lead them. But it was not without intent or hard work to get this team in the shape that it's in. And, I noted this earlier, I want to keep that team diverse. And so I want to keep those people in place. And that is another challenge on the longer term, not necessarily on the hiring side. But something that has to be considered as you look to 3, 5, 10 years out.
What we were talking about is we ran a survey on diversity and renewables in the industry about a year ago, asking folks how they felt about, when it comes to diversity, has the industry improved, stayed the same, or gotten worse? And about 50% of our respondents said they felt that, as it pertains to diversity, that things have either remained the same or gotten worse. How do you feel?
Well, I think it's positive that at least 50% felt things have gotten better. And I think my experience maybe represents all 3 of those viewpoints, and I would have had trouble responding to that myself. Mm-hmm. I think that, one, we're talking about a legacy utility industry that has been predominantly white male for decades. And while a lot of those people are aging out of the industry, it takes time to roll over the stock of people working in a specific industry. I think the greater opportunity comes in, and this is where I think it's getting better, is that we're seeing a lot of younger people interested in this industry. And when I was in college, they didn't have renewable energy programs, and now we're seeing those pop up, people who can specialize in what we're doing and get degrees in this industry. So I think the labor pool, while currently small, is growing rapidly with a more junior workforce that is diverse and specialized in this industry. And that, I think that includes STEM as well. My undergraduate degree was in aerospace engineering, predominantly male graduating class. I definitely see a lot more women interested in STEM, or at least coming out of the STEM fields, which is helpful for us. So I think it's challenging to change an industry that has been around this long. I noted that I kind of would fall into all three responses, and my personal experience at EDPR was very different. I do think that international, companies like EDPR, they are bringing in a very cross-cultural group of people. In the office, I would hear different languages being spoken, so you could really see that the diversity was present. But I think we still have a long ways to go. We are predominantly white male at the leadership levels, and we talked a little bit about how I'm trying to change that on my own team. But yeah, I think that we're doing okay. We can do better at recognizing that is important. So I think getting results of the survey like that are really important, and we really have to take this upon ourselves to make this change. It's not just going to happen.
Yeah, I think you have the right idea, and I don't think change doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately, at least at the magnitude that it's going to have to change over time to have a big difference, to make a big difference. So when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I find that the equity and inclusion part kind of gets dropped out of the conversation, and we focus a lot on the diversity piece, which is arguably the most important part to focus on first. But the equity and inclusion piece, to me, kind of refers more to what we talked about a little bit earlier, not just recruiting the right talent, but then retaining and promoting the right talent. So I'm curious, as it pertains to Rivon as a company, what are some programs or what are some initiatives that Rivon has started to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion across the organization?
Sure. So I'll talk about that in, I think, two ways. One is what we're doing at the Rivon level, and then the other approach that I really have control over and ensure on the equity component that is met on my team. And I can only speak from my experience. So at the Rivon level, the investment we're seeing investor mandates to go into green energy, and as a component of that, they want to see the diversity, equity, and inclusion component. As a private equity-backed firm, those investment mandates are really being pushed down to us. And so I think it's nice to know that the mandate is there, but we have to meet it. It's not a nice to have. And I think Rivon has really engaged in that through the creation of our DEI task force, which was created earlier this year. And that is composed of members across the organization at all levels within the business. So I think, again, you don't have a bunch of leaders running this. It is truly a cross-functional team. And so the committee or the task force itself, it represents these principles. But they've done an excellent job, I think, collaborating with Rivon's leadership to foster this environment of learning and celebration of differences. As an example, we recently had the Columbus Day holiday, which is now in Arizona, at least known both by Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. We're not trying to push a specific viewpoint on anyone, but I think what the team did was inform us of how these things had come about. What is the history behind this? Why is it changing? And so education is such an important part of eliminating bias, especially implicit bias. And I think the team, that is a good example, but there are many that they've been working on to support the education of our larger company. There's also, of course, the policies they recommend and the systems they're helping put in place to drive equitable practices. And internally, that trickles down to me, where we look at compensation across these different diversity elements. So again, I mentioned this before, I'm a data-driven person. I went to Booth, their slogan is show me the data. So I actually map out my team's compensation based on multiple variables to ensure that distribution is correctly allocated over a normal bell curve, that we're not seeing too much of a departure in any role based on gender, based on experience. So it's really, really important to me to put our money where our mouth is And I think the first thing a company can do, even beyond creating a DEI task force or a policy, is to ensure your compensation is equitable across these diversity metrics. And I think that's where you create kind of the equity, right? We've seen too much inequity, especially along gender lines in the pay scale. And that is absolutely something that I have control over in this position, and have been very hard-nosed in some sense about ensuring that all of my people are compensated fairly and equitably. And while they don't see their compensation, I think about it as, if they saw it, how would they feel?
Yeah.
And would they feel like they were treated fairly? And so I kind of use that as my compass for how we advance the team. Talked a little bit about the Rivon level and the task force, my personal approach, kind of taking the principles that they're communicating. And I think we're doing a really good job internally. And then, of course, providing our support externally through supporting of the Women of Renewable Industries and Sustainable Energy We Rise, and Renewables Forward, which is a collaboration of companies that fund and create these resources to inspire greater diversity. So I think we're not only trying to live by what we're putting in place, but help others do the same. And it is really an effort that all of us have to undertake, because Rivon is only one company. We can't change the industry on our own, even though we are definitely embodying the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I really like how you broke it down from, there's like the corporate communication, there's a corporate expectation, or maybe the corporate task force, and then there's the individual, because it can feel like everybody knows that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a hot button issue in the industry right now. So it would be surprising if a company at this stage doesn't have some sort of DE&I initiative, frankly. And we can struggle to feel authentic with these programs that are put out from a corporate level. And really what it comes down to, in my perspective, is going to be the leadership and the individuals who are in a position to hire, promote, and retain folks. That's where the most impact is going to happen. So I really appreciate that in you, as someone who genuinely cares about promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not just promoting it, but you live it. When you're coming in and you're looking to hire for your team, that's a line that you put in the sand of just like, this is important, just as important as somebody having previous utility scale solar development experience. I really want to see a diverse pool of candidates and then choose the right person from there. And that's just something I've experienced by working with you. And I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. But I think it's really true. I noted earlier that my experience has been a diverse one with great male and female role models, great men and women that have guided me. And I think that really influenced how, when I was now in a leadership position and had the ability to create a team from scratch, that I wasn't going to make the same mistakes or just hire fast to fill a need. Mm-hmm. Because once you've hired, it's much harder to change what you've created. And so I will say that for larger companies, I think that's a big struggle for them. Whereas I had this blank slate, I could create what I wanted. To recreate or retroactively try to implement these policies, I would have to recognize the difficulty of doing that.
Yeah.
It's certainly not an excuse by any stretch.
No.
But acknowledging your challenges and constraints is the first thing to correcting the problem.
Yeah. In terms of the future, I'd like to talk a little bit about the future of renewables, and then of course Arevon and you and your team. So I think from a macro level, I'd love to hear what you think the future of renewables looks like.
Yeah, well, I think right now the future is a bit uncertain. I think not in the sense that the industry is going anywhere. I think we've certainly established ourselves, but rather how we're going to embrace the challenges of the next few years, which are directly associated with the pandemic. One thing that I've really appreciated about Rivon is that in a challenging environment, instead of withdrawing or focusing much more on keeping the business running and reducing or just maintaining what we have, we have really leaned into it and said, well, we're just going to go hard and we're going to be smart, and we're still going to be successful in this constrained environment. So I think the next few years are going to be really challenging. That said, across the technology spectrum, wind, solar, and energy storage, I think we're going to see growth in all of those technologies, which I would say are the primary ones of this industry right now. Maybe in the next decade, we'll see green hydrogen coming around. I think the jury is still out on how that might come to fruition. But I think the future is bright. I think people are excited to be here. And I think even outside of the projects we'll build, I'm really excited about the growth of the workforce. And we've talked a little bit about kind of the new entries into this field. And I like to joke, the people coming in today, if I was trying to compete with them for an interview, like I would never get hired. So good thing I got in early.
So yeah, obviously unknown territory ahead of us in renewable energy. I think we can all agree we're moving in the upwards to the right as an industry. What about Rivon? So you talked a little bit about how Rivon was doing previously asset management and now is a vertically integrated renewable energy company. What do you think the future looks like?
I think that Rivon, and one of the reasons is that they are so uniquely positioned with within this industry. We have a very large operating asset base. As a private entity, we are the largest owner of solar in the United States. When you take into account public entities, there is only one major company ahead of us. So I think we have the foundation, and at the leadership level, the mentality to really grow aggressively and be successful in that. I mentioned how we're leaning into it as opposed to kind of withdrawing and sheltering from the storm. We've chosen our technology base, which is solar and energy storage. And while we're very established in the solar space, I think we're again leaning into energy storage as the next S-curve, technology S-curve that we need to climb, and already becoming a leader within that space. At the end of the year, we'll have roughly 1,000 megawatt hours of energy storage deployed. We have maybe 120 people at this company. There are firms that are many times our size that don't have any of that operating or any of those projects under construction or operating. And I really think that if you are not already in this space and learning the difficulties of this technology, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. You already are.
Yeah.
And so I feel very confident in Rivon's future, both as a solar and energy storage developer, construction company, and an owner operator, that we will continue to be a leader in the industry. And that's really exciting for me. Yeah. I cut my teeth in wind and then was in solar at the end of my career at EDPR, have focused, solely on solar and then energy storage here at Arevon. And just personally for me, that's been a huge growth opportunity because I have these experiences across all technologies that are currently operating in the renewable energy industry, and being able to bring my new people in and give them that same exposure to at least two out of three of those technologies is very exciting. So I feel like for the company, for myself and our employees, we are just really well positioned for growth, not only in the immediate future, which we've shown, there's actually material results that we can point to, but in the next 3 to 5 years, we have such a significant pipeline of work, both contracted projects and projects that we're actively marketing, that we're going to be real busy.
Yeah, that's great. I guess I'm curious too then with how, everything you just kind of outlined for the future for Rivon, your team, we already talked about, grew really dramatically this last 18 months. Do you foresee more growth on your team? Do you need to kind of let everyone settle and, get their footing under them? What do you see for the future for your team?
I think it's kind of all of the above, creating this, I talked a lot about creating a good foundation and support system for the team that I have, but my team will continue to grow. We're roughly 30 people today. I would expect by the end of next year, we'll be 40 to maybe 45. So that's another 50% growth on what we have today. And, I just, as part of my role, I'm kind of an all the time I'm hiring, always be hiring. I think even if you don't have an open position, there is so much going on that it will emerge, and you don't want to then be coming to market to try to find the people. You always need to be looking for talent. Even if you're not ready to capitalize on that, you need to have kind of the pool there lying in wait, and some of those will go away as they take other opportunities, and so you need to backfill just to always have people ready and lying in wait. So it's really kind of an all of the above strategy for us, making sure the people we have are supported and happy and confident in what they're doing, and then looking for new team members that are going to be good additions to this team, to my team, and that match with the culture of our organization.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. We have a very similar philosophy at Spencer Ogden because, I mean, good talent's hard to find. So you always want to make sure you've got a pipeline of folks because you don't know what could happen. People move on. And like you said earlier, you want to make sure that like the folks that do move on, you support in that transition. You know, it's a small industry, even as it's getting bigger. And then, you know, be able to backfill, or as the team, or as the project pipeline grows, you're able to slot someone in, bring someone in to support that growth. So in conclusion for our episode today, of course, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit with me and talk with me and share your experience from a personal perspective, and then also from, you know, working with Rivon and your experience working here the last 18 months. So thank you for that.
Of course, really happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. So in closing, I want to run a segment called the What's in It for Me. So for our listeners out there that might be interested in considering a career in the future with Rivon, or just curious about Rivon, what would you say is why should people consider a future career with Rivon?
You know, I appreciate the opportunity to make the pitch. Fortunately, with all the hiring we've been doing, I've had some time to tailor that value proposition. And I do think that as much as when we're interviewing candidates to see their fit with Rivon, it's important for them to feel that they, you know, to interview us as a company and make sure that we fit with them as well. So when you look at Rivon, we're really a startup without a capital problem, and I kind of referred to this earlier. We have this solid asset base, and what that has enabled us to do is bring people in who can really influence the growth of this firm. And I think we're uniquely positioned in that sense. When you look around, you have a lot of established competitors with established process. This is how things are done, whether they're good or bad. That is what it is. I think for us, we're kind of liberated from that. And for people who have 10 years of experience, 15 years of experience to right out of school, that's a really interesting proposition to be able to shape an organization at any stage in your career. And so if you want to come to a place where there's very challenging work with really great people to work with, that you can also have an impact and put your brand on, then Rivon is the place for you.
Great. Well, thank you, Aron. Really appreciate your time and looking forward to continuing working with you.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, Mindy. Thanks very much.